Depends what sort of person you are, very seriously.
Well, that's what you to tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I always remember Terry Dean.
Rock and roll is magic. I mean, the elements are magic.
For years, the world believed Marc Bolan died in a tragic but simple car crash on a quiet London road. The headlines blamed the tree beside the street. Fans covered it with flowers for decades, and the story slowly hardened into rock and roll history. But that was never the full truth, because hidden inside witness accounts, overlooked forensic details, and secrets kept silent for years was a far more disturbing reality. The object that caused the fatal injuries Bolan sustained was not what newspapers claimed. It was something else that was never supposed to be there. And the truth behind it makes Marc Bolan's final moments even more tragic than anyone realized. The rise of Marc Bolan. There are artists who achieve fame, and there are artists who become something closer to a force of nature. Marc Bolan was the second kind. For a few years in the early 1970s, he was arguably the most exciting figure in British popular music. A curly-haired, glitter-cheeked rock and roll original who seemed to have arrived fully formed from some other, more magical dimension. Teenagers fainted at his concerts. His records sold by the millions. His face was on bedroom walls across the country. But then, at 29, he was dead. The circumstances were reported, mourned, and largely filed away. But the full truth of what happened, and why, has never been as simple as the official version suggests. Marc Bolan came into the world as Mark Feld in September 1947 in Hackney, East London, to a lorry driver father and a mother who worked a market stall. It was an ordinary working-class household with no obvious pipeline to fame. But Bolan had something his surroundings couldn't account for: an unshakable internal certainty that he was going somewhere remarkable. By 9, he had already formed his first band. By his early teens, he was modeling for clothing catalogs and appearing in style magazines, using whatever small income came in to fund an obsession with music and fashion that felt less like a hobby and more like a calling. The breakthrough finally arrived in 1967 when he formed Tyrannosaurus Rex, a psychedelic folk duo that built a devoted following largely through the support of BBC DJ John Peel, who championed them with genuine conviction. In 1970, he shortened the band's name to T-Rex, swapped his acoustic guitar for an electric one, and rewrote his own future. The single Ride a White Swan was the turning point. It was lean, hypnotic, and unlike anything else on the radio. It reached number 2 in the UK charts. The folk fans were confused. The mainstream audience was captivated. Bolan had invented a new sound, and with it, a new persona. What followed between 1971 and 1973 was nothing short of a cultural earthquake. T-Rex scored 4 UK #1 singles in rapid succession, and their albums sold millions. By the end of his career, Bolan would have sold more than 39 million records worldwide. The press called it Bolan Mania. Teenage girls screamed at his concerts the way they had screamed at the Beatles. Boys copied his hair, his glitter makeup, and his platform boots. Ringo Starr directed a concert film called Born to Boogie in 1972, capturing a performance at the Wembley Empire Pool that remains one of the most electrifying documents of the glam rock era. For those 2 years, Marc Bolan was not just a musician. He was the center of British pop culture. But fame of that magnitude is a fragile thing. By late 1973, the momentum had stopped. The original T-Rex lineup fractured. Newer acts like David Bowie and Slade had absorbed Bolan's innovations and pushed past them. The public's attention drifted. Bolan watched his chart positions fall and his concert venues shrink. He responded by spending lavishly and trusting the wrong managers. By the mid-70s, Despite having sold millions of records, he was facing serious financial trouble. He drank heavily. He experimented with drugs. Friends who saw him during this period describe a man physically altered by his habits, his face bloated, his confidence shattered. The boy who had believed he was destined for greatness was now a man afraid of being forgotten. Then came 1977. Bolan cleaned himself up. He got sober, lost weight, and returned to physical fitness. He secured a hosting role on a Granada television pop show called Marc, where he gave early national exposure to punk bands like The Damned. For the first time in years, he looked and sounded like someone who had found a second act. The comeback was real. And then, on a rainy September night, it ended. That night, he was not alone in the car. The woman behind the wheel has been portrayed in conflicting ways over the years, as a girlfriend, as a fan, as a footnote. But her role in the hours before the crash and the reason their relationship was so controversial have never been fully understood. The controversial relationship with Gloria Jones. The story of Marc Bolan's death cannot be told without understanding the woman sitting next to him when the car hit the tree. Her name was Gloria Jones, and for nearly half a century, she has been reduced in most accounts to a single tragic role: the driver who survived while Bolan died. But Gloria Jones was not a random passenger. She was a significant musician in her own right, a creative partner, and the mother of Bolan's child. Their relationship was also one of the most controversial of his career, and the circumstances of that night cannot be separated from the life they built together. Gloria Jones was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, in 1945. She came up in the church, the same way many soul singers of her generation did. Gospel singing was her foundation, but she had no interest in staying inside the walls of religious music. By the mid-1960s, she had moved to Los Angeles and was recording for the Uptown label. In 1965, she cut a song called Tainted Love. It was a B-side, a throwaway track that barely registered upon release. But in the clubs of Northern England, where DJs prized obscure American soul records, Tainted Love became an anthem. Years later, the synth-pop duo named Soft Cell covered it, and that cover became one of the biggest hits of the 1980s. Gloria Jones wrote the blueprint, but most people never knew her name. Gloria met Marc Bolan in 1969. At the time, Jones was performing in the Los Angeles production of the counterculture musical Hair. Bolan was in the city for a short visit, still fronting the acoustic duo T-Rex, years away from his glam rock peak. They were introduced backstage after one of the shows. Nothing serious happened that night. It was a brief conversation, a handshake, a moment that could have faded into nothing. But Bolan remembered her. They reconnected in 1972. A Warner Brothers executive named Bob Reger facilitated the meeting, knowing that Bolan was looking to expand his live sound. T-Rex had grown from a duo to a full band, and Bolan needed a keyboard player and backing vocalist who could also bring something fresh to the stage. Jones auditioned formally, and she got the job. On paper, she was just another hired musician, but in practice, she became something much more. However, there was a problem. Marc Bolan was already married. In 1970, he wed June Child, a former secretary for his management company who had helped guide his early career. The marriage had been stable for a time, but by 1973, Bolan and June had separated. The separation was not a divorce. British law at the time made divorce slower and more complicated than it is today, and Bolan never completed the legal process. When his relationship with Jones became public, the tabloids did not see a man in a broken marriage starting a new relationship. they saw a married rock star carrying on with an American backing singer. The headlines were brutal. Jones was portrayed as a homewrecker, while Bolan was portrayed as irresponsible. The tabloid pressure was relentless. At the same time, Bolan's finances were in disarray, and British tax authorities were pursuing him aggressively. The combination of public scandal and financial pressure drove the couple out of the country. They lived as tax exiles in the United States and later in Monaco, drifting between rented houses and hotel rooms, never fully settled. It was a strange existence for a man who had once commanded screaming crowds of thousands. The glamour was gone. What remained was a quiet, domestic life with Jones and, eventually, their child. By the time they quietly returned to the United Kingdom, they settled in Richmond, London, a comfortable suburb where they hoped the tabloids would leave them alone. During these years, Jones was not merely Bolan's partner. She was his closest creative collaborator. In 1976, she recorded a solo album called Vixen. Bolan produced it and wrote several tracks for it. The record did not sell well, but it stands as a document of their creative partnership. She was the last person he trusted musically. When he played new songs at home, she was the first listener. When he doubted himself, she was the one who told him to keep working. On September 26, 1975, Gloria gave birth to their son. They named him Roland Bolan. Under British law, because Bolan was still legally married to June Child, his relationship with Jones had no official recognition. Their son was legitimate in every sense that mattered to them, but the paperwork did not reflect the reality of their family. Bolan adored the boy. Friends who visited the house in Richmond described a father who was deeply present, changing diapers, reading bedtime stories, and putting his career ambitions on hold to be with his child. The wild rock star of the early 70s had been replaced by a sober, devoted father. Unfortunately, the love they had built together was about to face a single night that would undo everything. What happened next has been told as a simple accident, but the details that emerged later suggest a very different story. And the woman sitting beside him that evening has carried the weight of those missing details ever since. The final hours of Marc Bolan's life. By the autumn of 1977, Marc Bolan had achieved something few rock stars of his generation ever managed. He had rebuilt his life. The heavy drinking and substance use were behind him, and his television series, Marc, had given him a fresh start with a new audience. For the first time in years, his future seemed steady again. But in a single morning, everything would disappear. The evening began as a celebration. Bolan had just wrapped production on his television series, a project that had consumed much of his energy throughout the summer. He and Gloria Jones went out to mark the occasion. They chose Morton's Club restaurant in Berkeley Square, a fashionable spot in Mayfair that attracted the kind of crowd Bolan had once ruled and was now slowly winning back. The mood was light, and they had reason to feel optimistic. Their son was safe at home with his grandparents, which meant they could enjoy a rare night out without the responsibilities of parenthood hanging over them. That decision to leave 2-year-old Roland with family would later be understood as the only reason the boy survived. The crash that was coming would collapse the passenger side of the car into a space no human could occupy. The evening stretched late, the way dinners that begin as celebrations often do. There was conversation, laughter, and the kind of relaxed intimacy that comes between two people who have weathered public scandal and private struggle together. By the time they left the club, it was well past 4 in the morning. The streets of London were dark and nearly empty. A light rain had begun to fall, just enough to slick the asphalt without turning it into a hazard. Nothing about the weather seemed dangerous. Nothing about the hour seemed unusual for two musicians who had spent their lives keeping late hours. Gloria Jones took the wheel. This was not unusual. Bolan did not drive. He had never learned, and the reason was not mere disinterest. Friends and associates from his early years have repeatedly confirmed that Bolan had a genuine vocal phobia of car crashes. He spoke about it often enough that people remembered. He reportedly believed, with a certainty that bordered on superstition, that he would die in a car accident before his 30th birthday. That belief was so specific and so persistent that it became a running joke among those close to him. He was 29 years old. He had less than 1 year left before the deadline he had set for himself would pass. Whether he thought about that fear on the night of September 15th is unknown. But the fact that he was a passenger, not a driver, was the result of a lifelong refusal to get behind the wheel of any car. The vehicle was a purple Austin Mini. It was a small car, nimble and popular in the London streets, but not built for high speeds or heavy impacts. Bolan loved it for its style, not for its safety features, because in 1977, a car like that had almost none. Seatbelt use was not yet mandatory in the United Kingdom. The car did not have airbags. The passenger seat, where Bolan sat, was inches from the door and inches from the road. In a collision, that seat would offer no protection beyond a thin layer of metal and glass. They were driving south along Queen's Ride in Barnes, a quiet residential area in southwest London. The street was lined with trees and family homes, the kind of place where people walk their dogs and children ride bicycles. But the road had one dangerous feature that had caused accidents before. Near Gypsy Lane, a small humpback bridge crossed over a drainage ditch. The bridge rose gently and then dipped sharply on the other side. At normal speed, most drivers would barely notice it, but a car traveling too fast could briefly lift off the ground, lose contact with the road, and slam back down with reduced control. Investigators believe that is likely what happened that morning. Jones later stated that she did not feel she was driving excessively fast. But the Mini was small, the road was wet, and the humpback bridge disrupted the car's stability at exactly the wrong moment. Within seconds, the vehicle lost control and crashed. Emergency crews arrived quickly, but the damage was devastating. Marc Bolan was pronounced dead at the scene. He was only 29 years old. The fear he had carried since childhood had finally come true. There were witnesses. Singer Vicki Aram and Gloria Jones's brother, Richard Jones, had been driving in a vehicle directly behind the Mini. They saw the car leave the road, and they ran to the wreckage before the ambulance arrived, pulling at twisted metal and trying to reach two people who were no longer in the same condition. Gloria was alive, but badly broken. Her jaw was shattered. Her arm and leg were fractured. She was conscious, but not coherent, trapped in the car, unable to fully understand what had just happened. Her brother pulled her from the car, while Vicki Aram helped. They did not know yet that Bolan was gone. In the chaos and the darkness and the rain, all they knew was that they had to get both of them out. Jones was rushed to Queen Mary's Hospital in Roehampton. The injuries were severe enough that doctors placed her in intensive care. She underwent emergency surgery to stabilize her jaw and repair the fractures in her arm and leg. The medical team made a decision that would have profound consequences. To prevent fatal shock during the procedures, they kept Jones heavily sedated. And they gave strict instructions that no one was to tell her that Marc Bolan had died. The news, they believed, could kill her. She remained in that hospital bed for days, drifting in and out of sedation, unaware that the man she loved was already gone. She did not attend his funeral, because she did not know there was a funeral. On September 20th, 1977, while Bolan's gold coffin was being carried into Golders Green Crematorium for a service attended by hundreds of mourners, Gloria Jones lay in a hospital bed, still believing he was alive. Her brother, Richard, finally broke the news to her that day. He waited until she was stable enough to hear it, and then he told her the tragic truth. The music industry reacted with genuine grief. Elton John sent a massive floral arrangement shaped like a swan, a reference to Bolan's most famous song. Rod Stewart and Keith Moon sent tributes of their own. Fans left flowers at the tree on Queen's Ride until the ground could not hold any more. The sycamore itself became a shrine, covered in messages and photographs and small offerings. For weeks, the site drew crowds. Bolan had been dismissed by many as a faded star, but his death reminded everyone what he had been at his peak: a pioneer, a showman, and a songwriter whose best work still sounded like no one else. Gloria Jones survived the crash, but the life she returned to was not the one she had left. In a single night, she lost her partner, her future, and the stability she had built around him. The physical injuries eventually healed, but the emotional and financial damage never truly faded. The devastating aftermath of Bolan's death. The aftermath of the crash did not end at the cemetery. For Gloria, it was only the beginning of a long and painful unraveling. She soon discovered that love, no matter how deep or how long, meant nothing to British law in 1977. Marc Bolan had written a will in 1973, back when he was at the height of his fame and still legally married to June Child. In that will, he left everything to his wife and his blood family. That was standard practice for a married man in his 20s. What was not standard was the fact that Bolan had never updated it. He had separated from June and had moved on with Gloria. He had even fathered a son. But the piece of paper that mattered most to the courts still bore his old life written in ink. There was another legal detail that made everything worse. Bolan and June Child had been granted something called a decree nisi in October of 1976. This was the first stage of a British divorce, a legal statement that a marriage has irretrievably broken down. But the decree nisi is not final. The divorce only becomes complete when a decree absolute is issued, and that was scheduled to happen in October of 1977, 1 month after the crash, 1 month too late. In the eyes of the law, Marc Bolan died a married man. The tragedy did not stop at outdated paperwork. In his final months, Bolan had been working on a new financial arrangement, a discretionary trust fund designed to protect Gloria and little Roland. He knew his old will was no good. He knew the divorce was not yet final, and he was trying to fix it. However, he ran out of time. The trust paperwork was never signed, and the money never moved. When the crash ended his life, it also froze every penny of his estate. British law at the time had no provision for common law partners or children born outside of marriage when it came to intestate estates or outdated wills. The courts locked everything down. The T-Rex fortune, built on millions of records and years of touring, became inaccessible. The house in Richmond, the royalties from the songs, and the publishing rights were placed in legal limbo. The consequences were immediate and brutal. Gloria Jones, still recovering from a devastating accident, was told she had to leave the home she had shared with Bolan. She and her 2-year-old son were evicted. Not because anyone was cruel, but because the law saw no legal claim. She had no money and no income. The royalties from the music she had helped create were frozen. She was, overnight, a single mother with no assets, no home, and no legal standing. She packed what she could and returned to Los Angeles, the city where she had first met Bolan. She left Richmond with nothing but the clothes she wore and the child in her arms. What happened next remained a secret for nearly 4 decades. David Bowie attended Marc Bolan's funeral. He stood among the other mourners, said his quiet goodbyes, and left. But he did not stop there. Bowie saw what the newspapers did not report. He saw a woman and a child left with nothing, trapped by laws that cared nothing for love or loyalty, and he decided to act. Bowie set up a private discretionary trust for Roland Bolan. He did not announce it or take credit for it. He simply funded it, quietly, consistently, and completely. The trust paid for Roland's private schooling, his living expenses, and his upbringing from childhood all the way into early adulthood. Bowie demanded one thing in return: absolute silence. He did not want the story to become a headline. He wanted a child to grow up with the stability his father could no longer provide. And for nearly 40 years, no one knew. The world eventually learned the truth about David Bowie's hidden generosity, directly from Roland Bolan himself, years prior to Bowie's passing. Roland broke his silence to publicly confirm that Bowie had stepped in as his anonymous financial benefactor immediately following the tragedy. The revelation deeply moved the music world, highlighting a rare side of Bowie, a man who used his massive wealth to quietly protect a fallen friend's family with absolutely zero desire for public recognition or media praise. Gloria Jones eventually found her own path forward. The trauma of that night never fully left her, but she refused to let it define her. In the 2000s, she moved to Sierra Leone and established the Marc Bolan School of Music and Film. The school teaches underprivileged youth, giving them the skills and opportunities they need. She did not rebuild her life by forgetting Marc Bolan. She rebuilt it by honoring him. But the official story of how Bolan died has never sat comfortably with everyone who examined the evidence. Over the years, questions have surfaced about the police report, about the condition of the car, and about the moments between the crash and the arrival of emergency services. Investigators, fans, and even those close to the case have pointed to details that never fully lined up, and a few of them raise a chilling possibility that the truth about Bolan's final moments may be far more complicated than anyone was led to believe. Debunking the myths. For decades, the story of Marc Bolan's death has been told the same way: that his purple Mini wrapped around a sycamore tree and crushed him against the trunk. That version of events appears in documentaries, articles, and fan biographies. However, that version is also completely wrong. The post-crash forensic mapping tells a different story. The Mini did strike a tree, but not first, and not fatally. The car left the roadway after the humpback bridge and hit a steel-reinforced chain-link fence post. That was the primary impact. Protruding from that fence post was a large structural steel eye bolt, a piece of hardware designed to anchor tension wires. The eye bolt sliced through the passenger side window glass and struck Marc Bolan directly. The injury was localized, catastrophic, and instantaneous. He died before the car stopped moving. The sycamore tree came afterward. The Mini spun violently from the fence post and came to rest against the tree trunk. In an ironic twist, the tree likely saved Gloria Jones from an even worse fate. Beyond the tree was a steep, heavily wooded embankment that dropped into a drainage ditch. The tree stopped the car from tumbling down that slope. What killed Bolan was not nature, but a piece of roadside infrastructure that should never have been placed where it was. Neither Bolan nor Jones was wearing a seatbelt. That fact has been used to blame them for the severity of the injuries. But seatbelt use was not yet mandatory in the United Kingdom in 1977. Many drivers and passengers still treated seatbelts as optional. Had Bolan been buckled in, the eye bolt would have missed him entirely. He would have been thrown forward instead of sideways. That small choice, repeated by millions of people every day, made the difference between life and death. The police motor vehicle investigator who testified at the formal coroner's inquest added another layer to the tragedy. The purple Mini was mechanically neglected. 2 wheel nuts on the front passenger wheel were completely loose. The tires were significantly underinflated. Those failures did not cause the crash, but they critically compromised the car's steering the moment it hit the humpback bridge at speed. A properly maintained vehicle might have stayed on the road. Today, the site on Queen's Ride has become an international pilgrimage destination known as Marc Bolan's Rock Shrine. Fans leave flowers, handwritten notes, and small offerings at the base of the sycamore tree. In 1997, the T-Rex Action Group stabilized the eroding embankment and placed a dedicated stone memorial at the site. 5 years later, in September 2002, a permanent bronze bust of Bolan was added to mark what would have been his 55th birthday. The shrine draws visitors from around the world, none of whom realize that the tree they come to see was never the culprit. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like and subscribe to our channel for more updates.